Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar that's been designed to help you take your design automation further using DriveWorks. I'm Ollie. I'm a technical specialist from DriveWorks. So part of my role involves helping users make use of our software and get going with the tools that are inside of DriveWorks. And I'll be joined today by Ronnie from Hawkridge. And Ronnie's going to help us go through the tools inside DriveWorks that can help you get started. So today, what we're going to be covering is today what we're going to be covering is we're going to go through the manual process, and that's going to involve the manual process that you as an engineer might be wanting to go ahead and automate. Then we're going to be looking at some tools inside SolidWorks that you might already have tried or be using to automate this process already, and look at some of the drawbacks that you might have found when using those tools. Then is the exciting part, the bit that I really like, and it's how you can use DriveWorks to help you work smarter. And that's going to be starting today. We're going to give you some steps that you can take today so you can start getting more out of the SolidWorks that you've already got and use the inbuilt DriveWorksXpress tool to help you work smarter. We should then have some time for any follow-up questions. But as we go through, Ronnie's already been through the slides to explain how to go and answer questions in the GoToWebinar. But if you've got any questions as we go through, just pop them in the chat. One of us should be able to see the questions come through, and we'll be able to ask them as they come through. We'll be also running a couple of polls as we run through to see what you're doing at the moment and what you're planning on doing in the future. And yeah, let's get started with the webinar. So the type of product that people usually want to automate involves the idea of a same but different product. If we think about some of the examples that you might work with already, we've got electrical enclosures, boxes, lighting, pressure vessels, furniture. There might be some architectural components like doors and windows as well. And if we take one of these examples, like a door, for example, they all look pretty similar, but it is likely that each time a customer requires a new door, it will need to be a different size, made of a specific type of material, with some kind of particular accessories, depending on where it's going to be and what it's going to be for. And so this type of product is what we kind of want to automate. It's the kind of thing that's very similar all the time, but it's obviously different to fit the different needs. So to get things started today, let's look at what the manual process that you guys might be going through, the kind of process that you might want to try and automate. So for this example, let's put you in the mind of an engineer that works for a kind of custom furniture company, and in this case, a cupboard manufacturer. So once produced, these cupboards, they're going to look pretty similar, but each customer might have different requirements. So they might be different sizes. The wood might be a different material, and that might impact how they have to be manufactured and how they can fit together. The product might need different doors, and those doors might have different styles, and those doors might also be different sizes and have different fixtures on them. And those doors might not be doors. They might be drawers, and you might need to decide and change the manufacturing data that you're creating for these same but different designs over and over again. So this is the kind of process that we want to automate. And if we look at what might be going on at the moment, the first step that's usually involved in creating this kind of product is some kind of spec sheet. So here we've got an example, and it might be just getting a salesperson going out to a customer that wants this custom product, and they're going, okay, what height do we want? What depth do we want? What width do we want? What do we want doors? Do we want shelves? What accessories do we need to add on? Doing some cost calculations. This might be a kind of PDF or Excel file, maybe. It might even be handwritten still. And this will get filled out with all the customer details that they need. And then after that, the next step might be, taking it to you guys as the engineer to be handed this spec sheet, and you're asked to go and create the manufacturing information required for the product that's been specified. And because we're working with the same but different design, it's always going to be similar. We're probably already starting from a pretty good template, which we can go and take a copy of. But as we all know, taking a copy of that can sometimes take a little bit of time, making sure we've got all the references right and we put it all in the right locations. After we've got that copy or that new set from that template, we're going to start going into opening up each part and making all the changes that are required to produce the custom manufacturing data that we need. So we'll manually go in, we'll change the some of the dimensions inside that part. We're starting off here with the side part of that cupboard that we were looking at. And we'll go and change it, the height dimension to reflect the height it actually needs to be. And that might not just be a direct number that's on that spec sheet. It might be some kind of value that you're calculating as well. So maybe doing some multiplication, some addition, minusing a little gap because you know as the engineer that needs to happen. So you're building in design knowledge as you go through this manual process. Maybe you've done the dimensions. Now you need to move on to the features. Here we're looking at making sure the hinge hole is correct for the type of hinge that we actually need. We'll run through, have a look at which material has been specified, make sure that's what the customer actually wants. Check the custom properties, so any metadata that needs to go along with that part gets added. And then go and save it out. Once we've made all those changes, we made our custom part, save it in the right location with the kind of file name that adheres to whatever your organization wants to call their files, whether that be sequential or something that includes some metadata about the order number or something like that. And we'll run through every single part in there and create our brand new assembly. And from that, we'll go and create the manufacturing drawings that we need to send to manufacturing to get this custom, same but different design created. And so it can be quite a time-consuming process. And so you've probably looked at some of the tools inside SolidWorks that give you some good functionality to get going with starting to automate some of this process. So we'll go through these now, and so these are some of the things that you might be doing, but look at maybe some of the drawbacks that you've experienced to become some of the brick walls that you've found yourself hitting up against. So first of all, you might have started to look at equations. So equations, building logic into your part so that, you know, if you change a certain value, something else updates that's related to it. And they can quickly help you update your part dimensions, and especially when they have clear relations to each other. And they can be really useful. But when we're working on these with these components all the time and working with slightly complex products, the actual equations can get pretty complex and can start to, and it means your components are kind of using, building in all of the design logic into the actual part rather than the components just being the manufacturing data that's required.
Hey, Ollie.
Yeah.
So quick question. You're talking about equations here. What do you find as far as like the biggest limitation or one of the limitations that is frustrating to you when you are using these equations?
That's a really good question. So one of the things about the way I like to work and the way a lot of people like to work is I like to have all of my logic in a single place. So I find when I'm working with equations in large data sets of SolidWorks models, that it's quite hard to maintain these equations when they're scattered through all of these different components. You know, I've got some equations inside the door component, I've got some equations inside the base component. And so if my design ever changes or something doesn't look right in the same but different assembly that I go on to create, it can be quite hard to work out what's gone wrong. And when I want to change the actual design of anything, it can be quite hard to work out what needs to change and in what parts. But it's a really good question. Cheers, Ronnie. So moving on from equations, you might have started to look at configurations. And configurations, everyone knows, they're really, really useful. And they're a great way to manage very simple changes that don't vary too much. So here we've got an equation of the door style, and this is a good start. So we've got a couple of different configurations in there with different kind of door styles that are turning features on and off. And it's a really good start, but it can get very difficult when we start to add lots and lots of equations in there, and difficult to manage exactly which features are present in which configurations. And so when we go and add more and more configurations, it can also lead to an increased file size. So when the files get larger, sometimes, even though we're all working on pretty good workstations these days, they can get difficult to manage.
Okay, Ollie. Well, same thing here. What do you feel is a limitation with configurations, or do you have any reservations as far as configurations are concerned?
So one of the main things I've found with configurations is that your design logic is kind of built into your parts or components. So what this means is when the data is used downstream for manufacturing, there's always the potential to cause lots of issues because I'm sending you a part, Ronnie, but actually I'm not just sending you a part, I'm sending you a part that has a potential to be 10, 20, 30, manufactured in 10, 20, 30 different ways with different sizes and different features present. So I kind of like to make my parts kind of inverted commas dumb and only have the information in them that is actually required to manufacture that part. And that's going to reduce the chance of me sending you a part and you going on to manufacture the wrong thing or work out the wrong thing or use the wrong configuration in a certain assembly. If I just send you a part that doesn't include all these configurations and just includes the manufacturing data, you can't get it wrong and there's no chance to make any mistakes. Kind of taking configurations one step further is design tables. So you've probably looked at design tables as it means that we can create lots and lots of configurations and lots of variations very, very quickly. But still, the drawbacks that I mentioned earlier about configurations still hold true. And they lead to pretty large files very, very quickly with only some simple changes. So if we take a look at an example and go into sticking with this door, let's say the width of this door, we can input between 350 and 750 millimeters, sorry, from the UK. And that can be in increments of 5. And that's going to give us 81 width options, right? And with height, they're going to be between 350 and 1450 millimeters in increments of 10, and that's going to give us 111 options. So what's this going to mean for design tables? For those of you that haven't used design tables before, it allows you to use Excel tables to quickly generate all those configurations we need, which is great because it can make some configurations pretty quickly. But because it's very easy to make lots of configurations, something as simple as the example I'm showing you now can lead to almost 9,000 configurations really, really quickly. And that's leading to over a 5 megabyte increase on your file size. And that doesn't sound that much. But when we put this component into a larger assembly of 20, 30, 40, 50 components, we can start to get pretty big file sizes really, really quickly. So now I'm going to pass over to Ronnie and take a look at what we've been through already. So we've looked at how the manual process that you guys might be trying to automate and some of the tools that you've probably already used inside SolidWorks, your equations, design tables, and configurations. And they're good tools, but they've got their limitations. I'm going to pass you over to Ronnie, who's going to talk a little bit about DriveWorks and how DriveWorks might be able to remove some of those limitations for you and start to help you work much smarter.
Perfect. Thanks, Ollie. Yeah, as Ollie was mentioning, we definitely have some capabilities within SolidWorks to create these automations. But the goal here is to show you how we could take it a step further and show some automation within DriveWorks and just the capabilities within that. Now, there's a couple of questions here, but as we're looking at the examples that Ollie showed us, some of you may have put yourself in the shoes that you're currently in, whether you're using equations or configurations or even design tables, right? But how many of you out there, have you ever accidentally changed a dimension for a configuration, but forgot to specify that you only wanted to change it for that configuration? And then you end up accidentally changing the dimension for all your configurations, right? Has that happened to anybody? I know it's happened to me a couple of times, and it can get pretty frustrating, right? Especially if you didn't want to change all of the dimensions. Or even just something as simple as, we have all of these configurations created in our model, But now I realize I want to save one of those configurations out as its own file, right? How do I go about doing that? And SOLIDWORKS doesn't allow you to do that out of the box. It's not one of the capabilities you have. But here at Hawkridge Systems, we have a team that develops different types of macros that allow you to do commands like that you wouldn't normally be able to do out of the box. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is put a link on our chat here that will take you to the tool that I just mentioned. There's a department here in SOLIDWORKS called, or sorry, Hawkridge, called Hawkware, where they create these types of tools for SOLIDWORKS to just automate some of the commands you might be doing on a day-to-day basis. Okay, but let's go ahead and take a dive into DriveWorks and see what the capabilities are within that. So you might be asking yourself, well, what is DriveWorks, right? We've had a little introduction here by Ollie about SOLIDWORKS and some of the automation there, and some of you may already be using some of those automation tools. But what about DriveWorks? How does that come into play with my design process? DriveWorks is a configuration tool, and what it allows you to do is automate all of those files that Ollie was mentioning. If you need to have the same but different files or the same but different models created and generated, DriveWorks allows you to automate that. And it goes beyond just automating SOLIDWORKS files. It's a full configuration tool that can allow you to also integrate other departments and automate documentations as well. Any information that you need, not just for the manufacturing process, but maybe even just for quoting, for marketing, DriveWorks will allow you to automate all of those different commands. And so we're going to go ahead and focus specifically on a DriveWorks product that is already available to you called DriveWorksXpress. So that way you can just take a dive into this automation, the automation tools we're going to take a look at today. So how does this work, right? How does automation in DriveWorks differ from what we just saw with Ollie? What DriveWorks allows you to do is basically create a form, is what we call it, where you basically input the values that are going to control all those different variations in your model. So the document that you saw, the spec doc that you saw Ollie show on the PowerPoint a little bit earlier, where you're specifying things like the height, the width, the length of these models, you would essentially have this form where you're inputting those values. And what the software is going to do is take all of that information and run some calculations so that it automates that information onto your actual SOLIDWORKS files. And the result of that would be brand new custom SOLIDWORKS files that are ready for manufacturing. And so as Ollie was mentioning, this allows us to just have more control of our design process alone, on top of keeping our models from automatically or accidentally being modified and just kind of breaking our models, or having files that are probably generated with the wrong dimensions or the wrong values. With DriveWorks, you can have it so that you control what the range of dimensions are supposed to be, or just control what those parameters are supposed to establish. So let's go ahead and talk about the first level here of DriveWorks. The entry level of DriveWorks is called DriveWorksXpress, which, as I mentioned earlier, is already available to you inside of SOLIDWORKS. This allows you to automate your parts and your assemblies. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is show you what an example of a DriveWorks project in Xpress looks like. And so everything that Ollie mentioned can be done in DriveWorks. If you've never used DriveWorks before, the Xpress tool is similar to other Xpress tools that are available inside of SOLIDWORKS. If you go to your tools pull-down menu on the top here, there's a section called Xpress Products, and you'll notice DriveWorksXpress is available there. So it's as simple as just going to that pull-down menu and activating DriveWorksXpress.
Hey, Ronnie.
Yeah.
So the first time that you go to Tools, Express Products, DriveWorksXpress, what's going to happen?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ollie. So those of you that have never used an Express product before, what happens when you specify or select one of those Express products is the software is going to prompt you to log in to your My SolidWorks account. And essentially, you need to log in so you can generate or activate the verification code. This is a simple process, and again, it's totally free. There's no additional cost to this. It's just a matter of logging in. My SolidWorks will generate your verification code. All you need to do is just copy and paste that into SolidWorks, and then that'll activate your DriveWorks Express product. But what you're seeing here is on the right hand of my screen is the DriveWorks Express tool. And so I have this cupboard project already up and running and ready for me to just run. So I'm going to go ahead and just run this project. And this is an example of what we call a form that allows you to input those values that are going to automate your designs. And so you'll notice there's different line items here for things like an order number, the height, width, and depth. Maybe I want to control the material, the door style, the handles, all of these different options that Ali mentioned earlier. And so imagine the process it would take for you to select those currently in SolidWorks, like Ali mentioned, right? You would have to open up those files manually, figure out which features or which dimensions you're trying to modify, maybe swap out different configurations. Here, all I need to do is just fill out this form, and the software will take that data and generate or calculate that information. So let's say, for example, I have order number 1 here, the height, maybe I want to type in 200, but you'll also notice that there's a warning message here on the right-hand side. And this is another, benefit of using Express over SolidWorks, where I can specify or I can limit the inputs on my forms so that it matches, any type of standard files or standard dimension or standard sizing that I may have in my company. So you'll see with the height dimension here, I'm limited to a range of 400 to 1500. And so that's going to refrain people from, adding information that may not be manufacturable on your side, or maybe just maintaining a standard sizing in your company. But you just fill out this information here with all the necessary data or necessary information for the manufacturing process. And so maybe I want to have a specific material, different types of door styles, and even just the handle, right? You could see that I have all these different options to select. And so what I want to go ahead and do next is just hit the create button down in the bottom. And what SolidWorks is going to do now is take all of those inputs, and DriveWorks is going to open up all of those individual files for me. It's going to recognize all of the inputs that I put into my form, and it's going to automatically update any of those dimensions or features or file properties. It's going to automate all of that information for me as I'm going through, as I'm running my project. And so there's a couple of things here that are happening in the backend, right? Not only is it opening up our files, you'll also notice there's a screen or a list here, a tree that is generated in the DriveWorks tool, which is basically letting me know the status of all of the steps my project is currently doing. And so it's letting me know that it's opening a certain file, it's generating all of those different inputs, running all the calculations for the dimensions and features, and then spitting out the actual SolidWorks files themselves and saving them out. And so once again, instead of having to manually open up each of those parts, making those changes and saving them on my own, DriveWorks is doing all of that for me. And so the end result would be a fully customized SolidWorks assembly with all new parts and drawings that are just very quickly created here through DriveWorks with without any mistakes, essentially, right? Because I am controlling the information that's being generated for these documents through my forms. And so it's important to, yeah, go ahead, Ali.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure. So the parts that we're creating here using DriveWorks, we're creating a brand new set of parts, but those parts are still lightweight, aren't they? They're not including lots and lots of configurations or anything like that. They just include the manufacturing data that those custom parts require.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of DriveWorks. We don't have to worry about having these large files like Ollie was showing us, right? So you imagine, your configurations, you might have a couple dozen configurations, you might have 100 configurations just for one component. So when we're talking about assemblies, right, those file sizes add up, and that can definitely slow the performance of your models, on top of just having a lot more to manage. And so it's exactly as you mentioned, Ollie. These are all brand new files that don't require all of those configurations created. And the beauty of it is that now that these files are they're regular normal SOLIDWORKS files that you're already accustomed to. And so once DriveWorks generates all of these, you can still go in there and make any manual changes to the files themselves if need be. But the beauty is, right, this saves us a lot of time and keeps us from any headaches of making any mistakes within our files. And so as you're seeing here, it's opening up all the documents, making those changes, and saving them out for us. So as this is running in the back here, I'm going to go ahead and show you how we could actually do this on our own. What are the steps I need to take in order to create this type of project inside of DriveWorks? And really, it's a simple 4-step process. And this is the biggest message we want to drive across here today, and show you all those 4 steps that are required to run a project like what we're showing you today. So the first step is to basically capture any model that you need to have some slight variation in. You want to capture the models on top of also capturing any parameters within those models that are going to govern those slight variations, or just any automation that you need to control within those files. And so this is a simple process. You basically recognize out of all the components in your assemblies, which ones are the ones that I need to make changes to. And then I also want to make sure I capture any dimensions that I want to modify, any features that I might want to turn on and off, suppress and unsuppress, maybe some file properties that I want to control, like material, for example. But the goal is to capture all that information. That's the first steps. And so let's go ahead and jump back into SOLIDWORKS here. You'll notice the DriveWorks project is done running. So again, you have a list here of all the steps it took to actually generate all of the commands there within DriveWorks. And so this is a useful troubleshooting tool as well. As you're creating your projects, you could run each step that you're creating and see if there are any changes that may need to be done, if something isn't generated correctly, or if it's not completely able to automate that process for you. But again, as we mentioned earlier, these are brand new SOLIDWORKS files. So you'll notice if I look at my file explorer here, this is where it's saving out those files. I have a folder for DriveWorksXpress, and you'll see all of these line items here are the brand new SOLIDWORKS part and drawing files and assembly files that I just generated. You'll notice there's also unique file names that are associated to them, which can also be controlled through DriveWorks. You can set up rules or an automation to actually generate unique file names. So let me go ahead and show you what that first step looks like inside of your DriveWorks project. So let me go ahead and go back to editing this project inside of DriveWorks. I want to open up what you would consider like the master, the parent assembly that's going to have or host all of the information, the original data here. And you'll notice in my DriveWorksXpress tool here, there's a couple different menu items. So there's a menu here for capture assembly structure. This is going to show you essentially your feature manager design tree, or it's going to list all the components of your design, your parts, your assemblies. This is where you essentially just select the checkbox to tell the software, hey, you know what? I want to control this component in my assembly. And you'll notice some of them are checked on, others are not. So something like a nail, or maybe something like, you know, some dowel or pegs, some hardware, that might not need to be, you know, automated, or I might not need to have any types of modifications to those components because they might just be standard for all of my designs, right? And so you have control of what you want to capture. And ideally, these are items that you're trying to create variations of. There's
So,
also, yeah, go ahead, Ollie.
so Ronnie, if we go back to the assembly structure there, just so we
Yeah.
can look at those checkboxes,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting because it not checking means that the newer top level assembly that we create, we're just going to reference those existing files, right?
Exactly. So
Cool. So we
that's
don't
the,
have to,
go
that
ahead,
means I
yeah.
guess we don't have to create files that we don't need. We don't have to create duplicate files or anything like that if we don't want to.
Right, exactly. And
Cool.
so that's saving us, you know, more space. It's saving us from having to manage too many files. It's straight just referencing these original files that you may already have, and all we need to do is just capture this information and tell SolidWorks to, or DriveWorks to automate it.
Nice.
And so let's see an example of that, right? We could also capture things like dimensions and features. So maybe in this cabinet or this cupboard, I might want to include the option of cable holes in the back of my of this panel here, this back panel. How would I go about, you know, capturing a parameter in DriveWorks? So I'll go ahead and just open up this back panel. And as Ollie mentioned, right, keep in mind, these are still traditional SOLIDWORKS files. These are just files that you're probably already working with or you're accustomed to. And so what I have created here is a feature for those holes in the back of the panel. And so, you know, if this is a design I'm still working on, you know, I probably would just create a regular SOLIDWORKS sketch, just like, again, you're probably already used to, you know, design the sketch, the geometry, add the dimensions, and then create a, you know, cut extrude feature. But if this is something I want to automate in DriveWorks, all I need to do is go down to my dimensions and features menu and tell the software, hey, you know what? I want to capture the cable holes feature. It'll recognize that selection. And then I could go ahead and give it a unique name if need be, but all I need to do is just click add. And so what this is allowing me to do is capture this parameter so that later on I could automate whatever I need to automate with this parameter. In this case, I want to have the option of turning that feature either on or off. And so that's it. That is what you would need for the first step of, you know, creating a project or building a project in DriveWorks. The next step would be to create your forms. And your form is what we saw in the beginning when I ran the project. This is where you're going to put all of the different inputs that are going to control the variations in your design. And so this can have as many inputs as you need or as little inputs as you need. But let's see what this looks, let's see what it looks, how we would generate or create this inside of DriveWorks. So on the top here, I have a couple of different tabs, different buttons that allow me to navigate these different menus. So I have a menu for forms. And you'll see there's already a couple created for us. So we have different types. You could have, you know, text box, you can have a pull down or drop down menu, and you name them whatever you want. So notice that these are the same controls that we saw when I ran the project initially. So different material, different door styles, different handles. Creating your form is as simple as just clicking this add button on the top here. And then all you really do is label whatever the control is going to be in your form. So maybe I want to just call this, you know, cable holes. That's what is going to be populated in my form. Select what type of control I want to use for this. So something for toggling these holes on or off might make sense for me to have like a checkbox to just turn those either on or off. So I'll go ahead and create that. And now that's going to be listed on my form menu here, all the way at the bottom. And so the neat thing about being able to use these form creations inside of DriveWorks is that I could toggle between the creation of the form and actually testing the form out, so I could verify if it's creating these controls the way I want, or it's positioning or placing them where I need them in my form. And so you'll probably notice that you recognize this form as the form I used earlier to capture all of those inputs. But what's important here is that we now have the option of, we have a checkbox for the cable holes all the way at the bottom. And so this control is going to allow us to toggle that on or off in our design. Now, this is just creating the form. We still haven't created the automation, or we haven't generated the rules that'll tell the software how to take the inputs in this form and generate or automate the parameters in our design yet. And that's where the third step comes into place. The third step is to write the rules that will govern that automation. We need to link the inputs in those forms with the design parameters that we captured in the first step, link them to the dimensions and the features that we want to control. And so that's created through what we call rules. And rules can be, they're not something that is a third language. I don't have to be somebody that understands coding in order to create these rules. What DriveWorks did is they made this similar to Excel-like syntaxes that you might already be familiar with. If anyone here has ever created some type of equation inside of Excel, the creation of these rules in DriveWorks is very similar to that. And so it doesn't require you to have a huge learning curve to create these rules. It's quite simple, actually. And let me go ahead and show you how you would go about doing that. So then we navigate to the next menu here for rules. And it's going to list all these different items that we can control in DriveWorks. So you can see there's rules that we can establish for file names, just how we saw with the first time I ran this project. We could have rules to govern how we want to control configurations, custom properties, or even dimensions, right? But because I created a new because I captured a new parameter, the software is going to flag me and tell me that I'm missing a rule to control that new parameter that I just captured, which is that feature for the cable holes. So all I need to do here is click this checkbox here so that I can go ahead and modify or edit, create the rule for that feature. So you'll notice that it's going to list the cable hole feature that we captured earlier. All I needed to do is just create a rule for that. And so this is what we call the rule builder in DriveWorks. This is where I create the logic that is going to govern or have the automation generated in our DriveWorks projects. And so there's a couple of different things I could do here. But think about what Ollie mentioned earlier. When we're creating configurations or creating equations, it could get pretty complex trying to control all that information as you're building more and more complex models and you're trying to control more and more parameters within your designs. Here with DriveWorks, all we need to do is specify these rules for those individual parameters and create the logic straight through this rule builder. So for example, this feature that we're trying to either toggle on or off in our SOLIDWORKS files, we can do that very easily by introducing some logic. You'll notice, that we have options for different logic, including if statements. So imagine trying to create something like that with just the SOLIDWORKS automation tools we saw a little bit earlier, right? How difficult would it be to do something with that with just SOLIDWORKS, right? Here in DriveWorks, I could just set up an if statement straight through this feature. And so I could say, you know what? If somebody selects that checkbox, I want you to create, run this command. If they don't select that checkbox, I want you to run a different command. And so how do I specify that checkbox, selecting that checkbox or not? You'll notice with the rule builder, there's actually some help documents or just a little information down below to give you an example of how to set up a rule. Here's letting you know, if you're using an if statement, here's how you would fill that out. And so again, just guiding you through this process of creating rules. I don't need to be, proficient in coding or understanding coding in order for me to create these rules. But what I could do here, there's a pull down menu for inputs. And you'll notice these are the inputs that you've created on your forms. So all I'm doing here is telling the software, hey, you know what? If somebody selects this checkbox for cable holes, if somebody selects that checkbox, and selecting it means that that is a true statement or a true command, what I want you to do with that feature is basically unsuppress that feature.
Hey, Ronnie.
And yeah, go ahead, Ollie.
I noticed that the rule builder went red as you were typing in there. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a good catch there. So you notice if I type in, let's say L here, this is the intuitiveness of not just DriveWorks, but specifically the rule builder. What's happening here is the software is letting you know that this rule that you're building, the syntax isn't acceptable, or it's not something that is complete. And so it goes back to, just guiding you and providing this environment where you can ensure that you're creating rules that are valid. And so later on in the PowerPoint, I'll show you guys a resource or an area that is available through DriveWorks that shows you, best practices and ways to actually create these rules that are going to be valid and available and acceptable. But that's a good catch there, Ollie. Thank you for that. And so here, the last step is, okay, if they select that checkbox, go ahead and unsuppress that feature, right? I want to have those cuts on that back panel. But if they don't select it, then I just want to go ahead and delete that feature altogether. And so this logic here, right? It's as simple as this. Imagine having to create that type of automation with just SOLIDWORKS, right? We'd have to create a configuration with those two different variations. The file size of your models would basically include all of the same features and information. Here, we could, as Ollie mentioned earlier, we could just have these dummy models, and then the logic is being pulled from DriveWorks so that you're generating new files that don't need to include all of that information. And so I just simply click OK here, and that rule has now been created, and that automation we'll see in a couple minutes here. But let me show you an example of, let's say, for example, dimensions, right? What type of rules would I create for dimensions? And how does that look like inside of DriveWorks? These rules don't need to be complicated, folks. You could have something as simple as this. I have a dimension here for the height of my cupboard assembly. How do I control that? How do I automate that? I could have it set up so that it's as simple as whatever value somebody puts inside of my form and the height control, whatever value they put in there is what's going to generate or control that dimension. And so it could be as simple as that. That's the type of logic we could create very easily and simply in DriveWorks. Or it could be even a little bit more complex where, I'm introducing equations now. Imagine controlling a dimension with equations in SOLIDWORKS, right? Some of you may already be doing that. So how would I go about doing something like, all right, I want to take the depth in my input form and subtract that by some type of equation that I've calculated for some of these dimensions. And so these rules can be as simple as you want or need them to be, or they could be as complex as you want or need them to be. They don't have to be, it doesn't have to be rocket science. But let's go ahead and take a look at the last step here. So we are familiar with the last step, which would basically be running the project. The last step would be to fill out that form and include all the inputs. And so with these DriveWorks projects, you could start building this logic little by little. You don't necessarily have to build all of this at once, right? Take what you've already created you would probably already have the SOLIDWORks models. All you need to do is just capture your parameters, create your form so that you can specify what inputs you want to calculate or automate, and then set up a project to run with all of that information. Set up the rules so that it could link both the inputs in your form to the parameters that you captured. And so let's go ahead and take a look at the final, running the project here on the top. We have that exact same form, and it looks like my screen changed here. So let me go ahead and show you my screen here. So this is the exact same form we saw earlier, with the difference being the cable holes in the bottom. We now have that as an option to toggle on or off. So I'm going to go ahead and run this so that we could see an example of what this looks like. It's going to give us the same, generate the same files as we saw earlier with these different parameters that I'm filling out in my form. The only difference is now I can toggle having those holes in the back or not. And so let's say maybe I do want that. I just click the check mark there and create it. So as this is generating, it's going to take a few minutes here, but as that's generating, we'll go ahead and let Ollie give you a rundown of the next level of DriveWorks that's available, which is DriveWorks Solo. So Ollie, go ahead.
Thanks, Ronnie. That looks really, really useful, and it'd be good to see the files once they're generated. I've just had a quick look at the time, and it looks like we are running out of time. We've had some really good questions as well. So I want to try and make sure that we answer everything. So the next step up from DriveWorks Express is DriveWorks Solo. And the first thing to note is there's a free 30-day trial. You can just go on our website, download it, and start having a go. And some of the benefits DriveWorks Solo offers you when compared to DriveWorks Express, and this is one of the questions that's been asked by Christian, I think, is we can control the scale and position of drawings. So this lets you create production-ready drawings. Because inside DriveWorks Express, although we can generate a brand new drawing, we can't control that scale and we can't control that position. So what that means is you might have to perform some manual adjustments to the drawings that you're producing with DriveWorks Express. Still a good starting point, but with DriveWorks Solo, using the same rules syntax, you can actually scale and position the drawing views on the drawings that you're generating. Another thing that you can do inside DriveWorks Solo that you can't do inside DriveWorks Express is save out some additional file formats with the files you're creating. So often, if you're creating a SolidWorks drawing and sending it to manufacturing, you're not going to be sending them a SolidWorks drawing file. You're going to be sending them a PDF of the SolidWorks drawing file. You can automate the process of saving out that PDF or the DXF you need at exactly the same time, or any of those files that you have access to when you go manually file, save as. You can do all of that inside DriveWorks Solo. We can also swap in dynamically, so swapping in different components very, very easily. And inside DriveWorks Solo, we can save your files into the exact location that you want. So DriveWorks Express saves all of your generated files in the same location as the files that you capture. Whereas DriveWorks Solo, using the same rules syntax that Ronnie showed us, you can build file paths to save them where you need them, whether that be on your machine, on a network location. And in addition to all of that, you can use tabulated data inside DriveWorks Solo. So that means you can start to pull values from long lists, sorting out lists, all using that same syntax that Ronnie showed us to make your configurators a lot more dynamic and data-driven. So, and because DriveWorks is scalable, it's a scalable solution that we've built, you can move from DriveWorks Express and move all of those rules up to DriveWorks Solo. So maybe today you go away and have a go with DriveWorks Express, find that you want to do even more automation, want to have a go with DriveWorks Solo, you can use all of the same rules inside DriveWorks Express, simply open up the project and it'll just work. So I'm not going to have as much time as Ronnie to take a look at DriveWorks Solo and kind of under the hood, but it's still all inside SolidWorks, and we can see here on the right hand side, little DriveWorks Solo task pane. In here, I'm just going to put, Ronnie has asked me to create him a cupboard, so I'll put, that's our HQ, Fellwall in the UK, right near Manchester. Salesperson, I'll put myself. And then here we're pulling from these drop-down lists. And already you can see that the forms are looking slightly different to Xpress because we can apply your own pictures and stuff to them. And the currency here we're selecting, it's not just a simple drop-down anymore, but that drop-down is now affecting a label that we're showing to say, okay, we want this in US dollars, calculate the price in US dollars. If we want it in sterling, calculate the price in UK sterling. And we can go through, select the widths what we want. We could preview this if we want to. We've got dynamic pictures updating on the form, all based on rules. So I'll have a shaker style of door. Keep going through these multiple forms so we can split and guide users through configuring something. And we can change, let's have oak with some D-style handles, and we can see our price updating to reflect. We can have a price breakdown, so labels with details about the type of thing we're configuring. If we had some extra time, we could click preview up here so we can make sure the choices that we've made are right before going on and completing our specification. But I'm just going to go right through and hit finish. And in DriveWorks Express, we get a little bit more control. So we can save our models, or we can save our models with the drawings as well. So if I select that one and hit finish, DriveWorks is doing the same process now, taking those master components, making brand new copies of them, driving them with all of our rules, and then saving them out with their final file names. But because we're using DriveWorks Solo, we're taking advantage of some of the features that I've spoke about. So we'll be able to dynamically replace things in and out, and we've got those dynamic forms that we're looking at as well.
Very cool. Thanks, Ollie. So let's go ahead and take a look here with the last level of DriveWorks. So we talked about Xpress, we talked about Solo. The third level of DriveWorks would be DriveWorks Pro. And going back to Christian, I saw you had a question about this as well, but this is the level that would allow you to integrate further with other systems. You know, those of you that are using PDM, DriveWorks Pro would allow you to integrate with your PDM software. You could check in files, check out files, have serial numbers generated, things of that nature. And you could even go further and integrate with CRM, ERP systems. So this is not only allowing you to automate your engineering department, but this is taking it a step further and allow you to automate other areas of your organization. Now, as Ollie mentioned, all of these levels of DriveWorks are fully scalable. And so whatever you create in DriveWorks Express, you don't have to recreate that at Solo or at the Pro level. You're essentially just going to take that same information and just build on top of that with the new capabilities of Solo or Pro. So it's important to note that that is a huge advantage of using any level of DriveWorks here. And we encourage you to just start with Express after this webinar so you can see the advantages of some of that automation. But let me go ahead and show you Pro here. This is actually available to anybody right now. So after this webinar, I also encourage you to join or log into this website here, but it's driveworkslive.com. And basically what DriveWorks has here are a huge list of different examples that you can see, how different projects are created. So for example, we do have that cupboard project here available as well. And if I go ahead and just run this project here, you'll see the next level of the DriveWorks capabilities within Pro. Pro allows you to have your configuration or your configurator run on a website, for example. So this is something that you can do with DriveWorks Pro, where I could now have something that's a little bit more customer facing as opposed to just internal with the engineers that need to create these designs. But you could have something a lot more sophisticated like this, or maybe I want to have a 3D preview of the model that's being modified or customized here. I could have dynamic, intuitive design changes through this form here, and you can see the controls are different. We have a summary list of the costing, just like Ollie showed us earlier, which same commands here. I could change the different currencies. There's different layouts here for the form, right? So I have a little bit more sophistication with that as well. But if I go ahead and look at all these different options with this project alone, one of the other items we could control is have real-time documentation available. So if I wanted a bill of material generated I could just click a button here in my form and see that in real time with the different parameters that I specified in that project. So DriveWorks Pro really takes you to that next level to not only integrate other areas of your organization, but also just have something a lot more customer facing and automating a lot more than just the DriveWorks, the SolidWorks files. Right now, I could also have quotation and bill of materials and other documentations automated as well, and just go from there. So I definitely encourage y'all to go ahead and run one of these projects. You could try some of the other ones, and that will also show you different forms that are available with these projects or the other capabilities within DriveWorks. But to finish the webinar off here, I just wanted to show you one more resource that I personally love the resources that DriveWorks has available to anybody. If I go to the technology menu here, there's a lot of different resources specific to how to create or develop a project in DriveWorks. So for example, rules, if you're still intimidated by rules, or you still don't understand how you would go about creating a rule, there's a whole menu of resources here that are available through the DriveWorks website, where you could see examples of how to set certain rules up or different types of rules you can create. So going back to something as simple as having a math or an equation rule, maybe I want to have some type of table generating the rules, right, or controlling the parameters for those rules. So you can have things like VLOOKUPs. For those of you that are familiar with Excel and using tables like that, you can pull information from a table using VLOOKUP. So maybe I want to control a customer name or a contact name just based off of a table that I've created. But these resources, again, are a valuable tool to help you or guide you build these DriveWorks projects that we just took a look at. So Ali, what do you think? What should we do? What are the next steps here for our viewers in this webinar?
So I think what we'd like all of you to do that are watching is go and activate DriveWorksXpress. If you've not used DriveWorksXpress, you'll have to go through that process that's up on screen now. There's 6 really simple steps, but it just involves activating it so you can get going. And that means you can just take one of your really, really simple parts and put it into DriveWorksXpress. Take a part that you have to create brand new versions of all the time, and just start getting some value back really, really quickly. It could just be one dimension that changes in there, or a couple of dimensions. And so you can get a feel for how you can put the rest of your products inside DriveWorksXpress, and keep doing it gradually so that you can use that time saving to start implementing more and more of your automation inside DriveWorksXpress. Now, to help you out, there's lots of online learning resources. If you type in DriveWorksXpress space what you're looking to do, there's probably some YouTube videos on what you're trying to do. There's a DriveWorksXpress certification that you can do for free online. So that takes you through building up a project and asks you some questions about the project you've built. So you can get certified in DriveWorksXpress. There's some sample projects on our website that you can download. So these will help you go, okay, so they've automated that cupboard. How have they done that? And you could download the project, open it up on your machine, take a look in the background, see how we built all of the rules. And we have our community site, mydriveworks.co.uk. And that's got lots of learning resources in there. It's got a full course on someone that's brand new to DriveWorksXpress that takes you from automating your first part to a slightly more complex assembly. And it's just so you know how to use those tools. Then, once you've started doing that, we've got DriveWorks Solo. So again, there's a free 30-day trial, so you can just download it and have a go. There is a Solo certification that you can access through My DriveWorks. And again, we've got those sample projects for you as well. So you can work out how we've scaled our drawings inside DriveWorks Solo. You can work out how we built some of those rules. And then finally, we've got DriveWorks Pro. So we've got a product comparison matrix, and that shows DriveWorksXpress, Solo, and Pro next to each other. And that's really useful when you're deciding which level is right for your organization as a whole. Even though we do recommend just go and have a go with it, DriveWorksXpress, there might be certain features inside DriveWorks Solo or DriveWorks Pro that your company needs. So the product comparison matrix is a great place to find that. And you can just Google DriveWorks product comparison matrix and you'll find it. We've also got DriveWorksLive.com that Ronnie's shown us the cupboard example on. and he's shown us those technology stacks. I just wanted to come back to Christian's question to answer it. If you go through the integration technology stack demo, so Ronnie went through the rules one, the integration tech stack will show you all of the tools inside DriveWorks Pro that allow you to communicate with ERP systems. So we've built lots of generic tools in there to make it nice and easy for you to get going with that. So that should answer a lot of your questions about connecting with ERP systems, Christian. But if you've got any more, please let us know, and we can make sure you get the answers you need.
Hope everybody enjoyed the information, and yes, feel free to reach out to Hawkridge if you have any additional information. We'll be more than gladly to answer any DriveWorks related questions you may have.